the attacks on civilians and hospitals, the refugees, the millions of people who had to flee. It was 2.5 million pounds, so that's 1,200 tons of medical material, all of it requested. Just how strong their motivation is. It's inspiring. Thank you for setting that example for all of us, all of you Ukrainians. The largest assistance that Direct Relief has provided in 75 years is to Ukraine in the past year. It will be an amazing reopening of Ukraine when the war is over. It will be extraordinary.
Hi guys, today we will talk with Thomas Tighe, General Director and President of American humanitarian organization, Direct Relief.
Well, first, I don't want to interrupt your workout.
Томас не хоче переривати ваше тренування.
Добре.
Thank you, Thomas.
Допомога також дякую.
Thank you, Thomas, for assistance and for help.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for your service. And you know, it's very inspiring. You have a lot of people. Is that us?
Дякую вам за вашу службу в Україні.
I'm with the military man. I feel okay.
Але от зараз прозвучала тривога, але ви людина військова, для вас в порядку речей, так?
Слава Україні.
Слава Україні.
Героям слава, ми не побіділи.
So how long has your rehab been going on?
Скільки ви вже в процесі реабілітації?
15-го року воюю, реабілітація 3 тижні.
Okay, he is participating in war since 2014, and his rehabilitation started 3 weeks ago.
Oh, really? So you're still maintaining your fitness level and looking good? And
Ви вже підтримуєте свій рівень фізичної витривалості, виглядаєте гарно.
Возвращаємо.
He is fulfilling it back. He is going back to his levels of physical activity.
Oh, good. So you've been here for 3 weeks?
Ви були тут 3 тижні?
Так.
Yes, for 3 weeks.
And then what's the plan? Will you be discharged from the military or go back in?
Який у вас план? Ви збираєтесь відставку з Збройних сил, чи ви повертаєтесь назад?
Вертаємося.
He is going definitely back.
Будемо вчити хлопців.
He's going to be teaching the new arriving people into combat. So he's going to be training the new coming soldiers.
Wow. So since 24, it's almost 10 years. Did you...
Майже 10 років були в Збройних силах.
З 14 по 16, а то інвалідність 2 групи.
Okay, from the 2014 to 2016, then he received the disability category, second disability category.
Уволили з армії і до 25 лютого був інвалідом війни 2 групи.
And he was discharged from the army because of the disability, but after the 25th of February 2022, he returned back.
Уговорили мобилизироваться. Я уговаривал военкомат.
Okay.
Не брали.
And then on the 25th of February, he was talking to the people to take him back into the army. He was persuading to take him back to the army.
Good for you. And you're doing training now? Are you a trainer?
Ви тренер зараз?
Зараз не можу.
He cannot tell.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
He
Yeah.
cannot disclose it.
Okay. But yeah. Well,
Військовий таємниця.
understood.
He is a
Yeah.
military secret.
So how's the rehab going here at the facility? Is it working out for you?
Як ваша
I mean, clearly
реабілітація?
you're working out, so it's.
Вам подобається? Вас це
Дуже
влаштовує?
подобається.
He very likes it.
Дякую за допомогу.
He is thank.
Надіємося, що після нас тут много людей стануть на ноги, на руки
Yeah.
і вернуться. Хто-то волонтерами, хто-то воєнними, хто-то морально.
He is
В общем, мы непобедимы.
He is hoping that
Народ такой.
after him, a lot of people would be rehabilitated here, will receive services, and would return back to the military forces or as volunteers and assist Ukrainian in victory. Because we will be the winners. We cannot lose as Ukrainians.
Слава Україні.
Героям слава.
Герої.
Да.
And he is a hero.
Yeah. Героям слава. All right. How was it coming here Unbroken, was it give you some hope about your rehabilitation?
Як вам в центрі Незламні? Вам дає якусь надію на реабілітацію?
Так, все супер, дуже хороший підхід був з самого початку. Тобто, як я тільки попала в лікарню, дуже класно і, в принципі, ще досі. Підтримка була завжди, і це дуже сильно.
Very effective approach to a patient, individual approach, and it's very positive from the very beginning of our stay here till now.
Are they working you hard on your rehabilitation?
Ви багато займаєтесь реабілітацією тут? Вам прям вас змушують?
Ну, хочеться ходити.
She wants to walk.
And how long have you had your new leg?
Скільки у вас вже ваша нова нога, новий протез?
2 місяці.
2 months.
Але скажи, будь ласка, що в тебе був нюанс з приводу ходи, так? Що ми коригували ходу, так? Чи ні?
На роботі.
Так, мені казали, що треба було коригувати ходу, тому це зайняло трішки
She's asking whether she needed to correct her posture and her way of walking.
Oh yeah, you have to relearn they help you with just relearning your gait and your walking.
Вам допомагають тут навчитися заново, як правильно ходити, як поставу тримати.
Та волейбол загалом досить хороша вправа, після неї відновлюється ніби відчуття правильної ходьби. Це досить класно.
They are doing exercises with her here where she can feel the balance and feel how to walk here correctly.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Alexandra, journalist. We
Oh.
talk with you today.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I saw that you talk with patient. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
How are your impression?
It's inspiring. It's a difficult situation for anyone, but you can just see the spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm not a specialist, but I think that has got to be a big component of the rehabilitation, just the support and the attitude. And, the team here at Unbroken has such a positive, supportive attitude. You can feel it, and it's great.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, let's start by talking about why do you decide to do charity, especially in medical field?
Well, Direct Relief, thank you. Direct Relief has been around for 75 years, and I have been with the organization about 20 years. But I think the desire to help people who are in difficult circumstances, either because they're born into a place that has challenges, it's a poor place, or as in Ukraine, I mean, history has brought upon the Ukrainian people this very awful tragedy, and they need help. So I think Direct Relief and everyone who works there feels a strong motivation to assist people who find themselves in these very difficult life circumstances. And in Ukraine, it's particularly inspiring, just given the injustice of the war that's been brought to the people.
Your organization is only about medicine aids or not?
It's health and medicine broadly. So I think it's a broad range from supporting midwives in Africa to communities in the United States, but often in emergencies around the world. Usually they're natural disasters. I mean, Ukraine is exceptional because it's this type of war we all thought was past. This is, it's senseless. And it's the type of war that everyone in the world thought we had evolved beyond. So I think it's a wartime situation is different for Direct Relief, but the same circumstances exist where you have people who need help. The government is very occupied trying to defend itself and its people. So it's important for organizations like Direct Relief And all the people who support direct relief really are trying to support Ukraine through direct relief. And as you know, I think so many people around the world are just, their hearts are with the Ukrainian people, and their hearts are broken when they see the suffering that is being brought upon the Ukrainian people. So it's a privilege for direct relief to assist, and we've done a lot over the past year, and we will continue to do everything we can.
We will talk about Center UNBROKEN, but now I want to ask you about your organization, especially about. Did you have any experience to help some other countries before you started help Ukraine in 2020? I mean that maybe your help countries at war, not only Ukraine.
Yeah, I think thankfully the war experience, direct relief was started after World War II by an Estonian man who had to flee and ended up in America. And so it's all privately funded, and it's just pure philanthropy. But, the circumstances of war, usually what direct relief works on are areas of poverty or natural disasters, and sometimes both. But in Ukraine, we had worked for about 10 years, but it was very focused, specialized on cancer medications that are very expensive. And direct relief works with the manufacturers, the global manufacturers of medications, when they want to make a charitable contribution. So we had some experience in Ukraine for 10 years before the war. And then during COVID, we were also able to work with Ukraine to provide some of the initial monoclonal antibody therapy before there was a vaccine. And that was just a few months before the war started. So we had been working with the Ministry of Health and with the government, and we understood the protocols. So when the war started, we were able to, just focus on a much broader type of assistance that we've been doing now since February of last year.
In March 2022, your organization with our Ministry of Health provided medical assistance. It was emergency aid packages. What motivated you to help Ukraine in general? Because you say that it was before war too. Now in this year, last year, what you motivated?
Well, I think it was obvious to everyone in the world that Ukraine needed help. It had to defend itself against the Russian army and military, and it's not a huge country. So I think it was clear that the support for other things like health and medical were really important, and everyone, I think, around the world wanted to help. Direct relief received private support from people in 85 countries to help Ukraine. And that they found us. So the strong desire of people in the world to assist Ukraine, we saw that in the United States. And they found direct relief because they thought direct relief, was helping, and they wanted to be part of that. So I think our motivation was very clear, and it was very strong. I think this horrible war left millions of people vulnerable. And the attacks on civilians and hospitals, the refugees, the millions of people who had to flee, I think they were in very challenging circumstances. So I think as a humanitarian organization, it was a very clear humanitarian case of high need. So it was not, the motivation was very strong, it was very clear.
I know that you, direct relief provide a medicine aid. Last year it was 1,000 tons medical aid. Can you tell about it? What it was?
Yeah, for direct relief, the volume of the assistance, it was it was 2.5 million pounds. So that's 1,200 tons of medical material. All of it requested. All of it approved by the Ministry of Health, and most all of it contributed by people, the manufacturers, who understood what was happening in Ukraine. But it was kind of a broad range. It was, everything from vitamins, prenatal vitamins for women who are pregnant, sutures and wound care for people with injuries, to cancer medications and very specialized therapy that were needed by people who were in treatment, and the war interrupted their cancer therapy, which is very dangerous. And so we understood that, the needs were not just for the people who were affected by the war. Everyone was affected by the war. Even if you had your if you had diabetes or asthma or hypertension and you couldn't get service, you could become sick or die because your health care is interrupted. So it was horrible to see, and that was a very strong motivation. And we felt very fortunate. There's so many good people and organizations that we were able to connect with here in Ukraine, and had the approval of the government that we had been working with before during COVID. So I think that's why the circumstances lined up and allowed Direct Relief to expand our assistance to more than we have ever done in 75 years. Ukraine is by far the largest effort in 75 years.
Now we talk about Center UNBROKEN. I know that last year you signed a memorandum of cooperation with Oleg Samchuk, head of this hospital, and it was about the fact that your organization financed this center $1 million, yes?
Yeah. It was a privilege to do that. I think it's important. As I said at the time, it's difficult to predict the future in life, but it's easy to predict that the people here at UNBROKEN need help for the rest of their lives. That is easy to predict. They've sustained serious injuries, and it's not just treatment and it's done. It's a lifetime commitment, particularly for children whose prosthetics need to be refitted as they grow up. And so for Direct Relief, it was very clear, highly motivating, and very important that as Ukraine must focus on defending itself, that it's a good role for other people from outside Ukraine to help the people who've been affected so horribly and have had their health compromised. So it was an easy decision to focus on rehabilitation. And when we came here and met with the team for UNBROKEN, their spirit, their motivation, their commitment, the quality of their services, it was infectious in a good way. So I think it was the initial $1 million, and we will continue to help as much as we can. And we would like other people around the world to know that if they want to help Ukraine, this is one important way, because the needs are large, the care is expensive, the technology is advancing on things like robotic prosthetics, and it's really important that the world can do something meaningful for the people who've been affected by this unjust war. So for us at Direct Relief, it's a privilege. And for all the people from the 85 countries who gave money to Direct Relief, we want them to know this is where your money goes, to UNBROKEN. And we are very pleased to share that so other people can learn about it and there can be more support, and more support is needed.
So this money goes to rehabilitation equipment, yeah? I asked because rehabilitation is very important now for civilian, for military. Why for rehabilitation equipment?
Well, I think it's equipment and services and staff and paying for the light bill. It's all important, and I think it's not just the equipment, because I think the training and the specialized care that I think as I understood it, the idea the larger idea is to build additional capacity in Ukraine so that you have rehab specialists, because there are more people who need care, rehabilitative services, physical rehabilitation, occupational rehabilitation, speech therapy. I mean, there's as well as the prosthetics and physical rehabilitation, and those are long-term prospects for the patients. And it's a great idea to have the focused attention here at a center of excellence, so that people from around Ukraine, whether military people or civilians, they're both getting injured and targeted. And so I think it's so important. This will be a long-term consequence of the Russian war. And I think that those of us who want to help the people of Ukraine, to help the people who've been most seriously injured, is really important. And it's a privilege for Direct Relief to do that.
I know that 1,000 people in this hospital were treated, and a third of them needs prosthetics, needs high-quality rehabilitation, and I see that you talk with them. What are you talking about today? And maybe they tell you about their injuries, about their life situation.
Well, I think that, I could tell, just speaking with the people going through their rehabilitative services now, just how strong their motivation is to get back to work. The soldiers, who've been injured, the determination in their eyes, it was very clear. We didn't talk about their physical injury, or we talked about their motivation and the support that they've received here at Unbroken. And I think each one of them said how much it mattered to them, the inspiration that was coming from other patients and the staff here at Unbroken. So that was very clear. Even Dimi, who just 1 week had a new leg, he wanted to get up and show me. And he was, he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He was showing me that he's going forward. And so that, to just see and hear and feel that motivation, it's very powerful.
Yeah, it's true. We communicate with military, with civilian every day, and I can say that they are really strong, physically, in spirit, yeah. So, how long have you been in Ukraine? Maybe you have experience to go to hotspots, maybe.
Well, except for the air raid siren that no one else listened to about 5 minutes ago, no one even, I think I was the only one who heard that. No, I've been in Ukraine 3 times in the past year. This is the 3rd trip. Not to the hotspots, to Kyiv, and twice now to Lviv, but not to the front lines, obviously. But I think what we've been trying to do is just see how we, as a humanitarian health organization, can provide assistance. But, I've been in a lot of countries around the world, and this sense of national unity and national pride is unusual. There's a real intense commitment that is very clear to an American. The pride of the country, the pride of the military, and the commitment to withstand this horrible situation that you're in. So I think there are plenty of hot spots, and I don't want to get in the way, but I think what we can do, many groups like Direct Relief who are here just to help, the best thing we can do is support the Ukrainians themselves. And Unbroken is a Ukrainian plan. It's not an international plan. This is run by Ukrainians for Ukrainians, and that's how it should be. And so Direct Relief understands that. We work in about 100 countries around the world each year, including the United States. But the local leadership is always the most important ingredient. Always. It's not always the money. Money's important, but it's the commitment, the dedication, and service to people that's what's the most important ingredient. And that's clearly present at Unbroken. It's clearly present throughout Ukraine. And it really is highly motivating, inspiring to see it.
Okay, let's talk about a little bit a statistic. In February of this year, the United Nations announced that 40% of the population of Ukraine needs humanitarian aid. How do you assess the situation with the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine?
Well, I think it's still unclear. I think clearly the war requires a big investment for Ukraine to defend itself, and that leaves many other areas uncovered, right? And so I think it's important for the international community, both governments and non-governments and regular people, to do what they can to support the Ukrainian people. And that would be true anywhere else. If this were happening in another country, the Ukrainians would understand that you have to defend yourself. And while you're defending yourself, there are many other things you cannot do. And that is why nonprofit organizations exist. That's why we have charities. But I think that at the large, high level, I think the international institutions, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, I think that's why we have those institutions too, to mobilize large pools of resources to focus on these big needs that exist in the world. But I think for a lot of the private nonprofit organizations, that's why we exist too. And I think often the nonprofit organizations like Direct Relief, we can move faster. We're not as large, but I think we can be more focused and faster. And so that's what we are trying to do in Ukraine, to be responsive to the circumstances as rapidly as we can, and making sure that it's Ukrainian-led, not imposed from outside.
In your opinion, how much time need to change situation, maybe after war?
I think it's too early to tell. I mean, I think it will, once Ukraine wins, then I think there'll have to be a full assessment of really the damage that's been caused. I think it's unknown now. I think so. You can think in short term now because you don't know the long term yet. But I think it's a little early to tell what the full reconstruction and how it's going to shake out. I think you're still fighting a severe, intense war. So I wouldn't want to guess about what the long-term prospects are, other than the obvious. It's going to be a large effort required with a lot of support from outside.
Maybe you have a plan for next help to Ukraine in future.
Well, we're hopeful that we're visiting in next month. I think the Unbroken will be hosting an international conference, I believe, to keep the focus and attention on rehabilitative services, which Ukraine is already evolving very rapidly in promoting. And so we will continue at Direct Relief to support Unbroken, the rehab efforts throughout Ukraine. And we think it's just a very important thing that regular people can do. I mean, soldiers have to fight the war, but the rest of us can support the people. And in health and medical, clearly there's a lot of needs, and there's a lot of deferred things that you have to focus on the war, so that comes at the expense of other important priorities. So when the war ends, I think to identify what those priorities are and what's needed will be important. But I think the great thing about Unbroken is that it's very clear now that there are a lot of people who've been seriously injured. They're going to need care for a long time. And to help build the Ukrainian capacity and talent to take care of their fellow Ukrainians is just a really important part of any long-term plan. And so that's why Direct Relief is so pleased to be part of it in a small way.
We asked every people who come to Ukraine about what is Ukraine for you. So what is Ukraine for you?
It's inspiring.
Maybe because it's about people, Ukraine.
Yeah, I think the Ukrainian people...
In general.
Yeah, I mean, no one would wish this situation on anyone. But I think to see in all the predictions that existed when the war started were wrong. They didn't account for the, the fact of the spirit of the Ukrainian people, the dedication, the tenacity, the heroism, the leadership. And those are concepts that we read about in school, but you don't often see in real life. You know, it's something you read about in the history books. And I think for myself and many other people, seeing every day what heroism looks like, sacrifice, it's inspiring.
Okay, let's talk about direct relief in general. How does direct relief help countries suffering from different disasters, conflicts?
Well, it's often the same. I think we try to look at areas of health needs that are not, that people can't afford. So in general, we try to mobilize private resources and provide those health resources to people who need but cannot afford them. And there's a lot of people they are born into poverty, or they're in a country that's hit by a natural disaster, or both. I mean, a poor country where there's just not a lot of resources or private enterprise. Often those countries, the government doesn't have the financial resources to provide the services it would want to do. So there's a big gap in what's needed for health services and what's available. And I think Direct Relief for 75 years has tried to mobilize private resources for the public benefit on an ongoing basis and when an emergency happens. So we try to do what we can to fill that gap around the world, working with the private sector, the healthcare industry, to invite their participation and encourage them to make donations of products that they manufacture for people who will simply not be able to afford it. And unfortunately, that's a lot of people. And it gets bigger when there's a big emergency and it affects the economy and it increases the need. Often at a time when the economy gets worse, the needs get worse too. And so the gap gets bigger. So that's what Direct Relief has been doing for 75 years. And it's very rewarding to see what's possible. And I think as Ukraine is an example of what's possible, it's a powerful example of just, how the spirit of people, the commitment, it inspires other people to get involved. And I wish that were more common in the world, but thank you for setting that example for all of us, all of you Ukrainians.
I understood that you help people all over the world. Maybe you can say about your the largest aid, and it was what country, what people?
The largest assistance that Direct Relief has provided in 75 years is to Ukraine in the past year. And we are fortunate that circumstances lined up because a lot of the healthcare companies in Europe understood what was happening in Ukraine and they wanted to assist. Direct Relief has a presence in Europe and distribution capabilities in the Netherlands. So we were in a good position to use our resources to channel health resources into Ukraine, and with the permission and agreement with the Ukrainian Ministry of Health, and which we are listening to and taking their guidance of what their priorities are. But they're fine organizations, local NGOs in Ukraine, and we work with several of them who are private organizations, but very committed within their own communities or regions to do whatever they can. And so we found many of them, and the team, the small team here, both in Poland and here in Ukraine, they're good connectors, so they can identify good people who are honest with integrity and who are focused on a particular area of health services. And that allows us to then identify either financial resources or medications or supplies that are needed. And then we try to make sure the supply chain connects the material to the people who need it.
You work at charity a lot of many years. What do you say about successful mission humanitarian? What is the aspects needs for it?
Well, transparency is a big one. I think because you're using other people's money. And we completed a one-year report of everything Direct Relief has done in Ukraine for the Ukrainian people to understand that. Like, people who give Direct Relief money, it's for Ukraine. It's not for Direct Relief. It's to Direct Relief, but they're giving us so Direct Relief will help Ukraine. And so we want people in Ukraine to understand that, what we've done with the money, what we've done with the material, and that's important for everybody. So I think to have in general, you want good people who are working, who are well qualified and motivated by all the right things and doing good work, and to be transparent. And I think people will make mistakes and no one's perfect, but I think to be clear about it and disclose all that information, which we have tried to do and will continue to do, we think that's very important anywhere in the world. People are trusting Direct Relief with their own money to help, and so they are owed, clarity and transparency, and our best efforts to make sure that their intention to help the Ukrainian people, for example, that we've done everything we can to do it correctly.
Do you want to return to Ukraine after our victory?
I would love to return. Even before, but it's as I mentioned, it's inspiring to see, and I think it's important for those of you in Ukraine just to know how many people are concerned about your welfare. I know it's hard when you're, living here in it's very difficult circumstances, but there are people around the world who are looking to Ukraine and being inspired by what you're going through and want to assist. So it will be an amazing reopening of Ukraine when the war is over. It will be extraordinary. You have a fan club of billions of people who are all going to want to come visit when it's safe. It's not safe for tourism and to experience that at the moment, but I have no doubt when this war is over and Ukraine is free, you will be overwhelmed with people from around the world who may drive you crazy because there are too many of them, but they will be here with good spirits and wanting to participate in the future of Ukraine.
Yeah, maybe you have a new friends in Ukraine.
I hope so. Well, Ukraine deserves a lot of friends, so I'm happy to consider myself one of them, and everyone at Direct Relief. And people from 85 countries who, through Direct Relief, want to extend their hand of friendship to Ukraine.
Okay, on the finish of our conversation, I want to ask you about some disaster this year of several countries. Several countries suffered from strong earthquakes, including Turkey. Your team also helped?
Yeah, we are helping there. We helped right after. Direct Relief has been assisting on health and humanitarian health projects in Syria in the opposition areas for years. And so we've been able, both Syria and Turkey were hit severely by the earthquakes. And so similarly, Direct Relief was working to bring in, it's been over 100 tons of medical material that has been requested by physicians and health professionals in Turkey, as well as in Syria. And we have a couple of full plane charters that are bringing in material in the next few weeks as well. So, it's a severe, hundreds of thousands of buildings were destroyed just in Turkey, and the information out of Syria is less complete, but it's a humanitarian catastrophe, and they need help. And it, I think Syria's had a long-running conflict, so the logistics challenges of getting support to there are interesting. But I think we've been able to work, as we did in Ukraine, by working with local people we knew already. That's the same approach that we're using in Syria. And in Turkey, Turkey had never really requested or needed help as a European country, but it was so big. We did know some of the local groups that do search and rescue in Turkey, so we could move rapidly to support them, and then have continued to respond as the needs are identified for medication, supplies, wound care, in a way not dissimilar from some of the injuries caused by war. These were obviously caused by earthquakes, but many of the same health risks arise when there's that much damage to people and the infrastructure and the health facilities that serve them. So we're trying to do whatever we can to bring in the private resources in a coordinated way with the government of Turkey and at least the opposition-held territories in Syria.
Thank you for our conversation, and thank you for our meeting also. Nice to meet you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.